The correlation between politically correct belief and verbal IQ was negative 0.45, which is a walloping correlation. It was one of the biggest correlations we ever saw in any study. It's higher than the correlation between IQ and grades, which is really something because those measures are kind of the same thing.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and you know, there is evidence in the university setting too that the most politically correct disciplines are those who are simultaneously most dominated by females and that have the least bright students.
I'm doing one thing really stupidly that I should stop doing. It's like, how long is it going to take you to figure out what that is? It's about 2 seconds. You've known it forever. And you could even make it less demanding. You could say, there are some stupid things that I'm doing that I know are stupid and wrong, that I could stop doing, that I would stop doing. And then you can just start with that. And you can just do that, and maybe it's just a little thing, although it's not, because it's a step forward on the proper voyage. It's not a small thing. And you think, well, what would happen? You could say, let's do this for a year or even a month. Just try not to do things you know to be stupid and wrong for a month. And that means not to say things you know to be stupid and wrong as well. Maybe that's the most important thing. Just do it as an experiment. See what happens. And it's so fun, because I have people writing to me from all over the world who are saying they're doing that. They're saying, well, I cleaned up my room, and then I stopped saying stupid things, and my God, it's like, things are way better. It's like, who would have guessed it? And so, it's low-hanging fruit, man. Because that's the other thing. If there's a lot of things wrong with you, then it's really easy to start fixing it. There's so much territory that you can inhabit. Wouldn't it be something if you could wake up and your day was composed in part of people thanking you for all the good things you've done in the world? Wouldn't that be good? It's not impossible for that to happen. If you don't have your destiny in hand by your time you're 30, it's rough. You start hurting. And if you don't have your destiny in hand by the time you're 40, then you really start hurting. And 40 is a real fork in the road. The fork in the road, that's always where you meet the devil, by the way. And that's because every time you have to make a decision, the possibility of evil beckons. That's why that is. I had a friend, I've told you a little about him, and he killed himself just after 40. He had had a book published with a very small press. He was quite a good writer, but he could not get himself together, and it hit him too hard at 40. And I'm not saying that it's hopeless at 40. I'm not saying that partly because of these verses, but also partly because of what I've seen in my clinical practice. I've had people come to me who have had very chaotic and ill-spent lives, let's say, who were in that neighborhood of age, and it's true for people who are older as well, who then decided to make a real effort and to try to make where they were better, instead of being bitter about where they weren't, because that's the bitterness that really does you in. It's really not good. It's the opposite of gratitude. It's the manifestation of resentment. It makes you malevolent. It's very, very bad to be bitter. It's hell to be bitter. And if you're 40 and you're not successful, then you have to accept your lot. And you have to start to improve what's right in front of you. And if you do that, it doesn't take very long. It's quite interesting to watch people. Things can be a lot better in 6 months, and they can be way better in 2 years. Like, it's a struggle, uphill struggle, but it's by no means impossible. And I don't know, again, what the limit of that is. I suppose it depends to some degree on the degree of your commitment. Let's say you're an animal, and you act, and it doesn't go very well, and then you die. Well, you've learned that acting that way didn't work, but now you're dead. So that's not that helpful. And then you might think, well, maybe you should represent how you're going to act. So here's a box with a snake in it, and your coffee cup is inside the box with the snake in it. And I say to you, imagine picking up the coffee cup. And you imagine it, and you think, oh, I'll pick up that coffee cup, and then the snake will bite me, and I'll die. And so then you decide that implementing the strategy of picking up the coffee cup is probably not a very good idea. And so that stupid idea has to die, and not you. And so Popper's idea was that the reason that we developed the capacity to abstract was so that our stupid ideas could die instead of us. It's almost impossible to overstate how brilliant an observation that is. As a standard animal, you would have to produce variants of yourself reproductively to go out into the world and try their hand at survival. And that's pretty costly because you have to produce all the biological replications of you. So you could only probably manage that maybe 13 times if you really, really worked at it. And then the cost of their failure is extraordinarily high because they die. Well, you can just sit there and produce like 20 different versions of you extending out over the next week or the next month, and you can run them through a simulation and kill off all the ones that you don't regard as suitable and then only implement the successful ones. Now, you could debate about how accurate you might be at doing that, because it would depend on your knowledge. But we do know that intelligent people tend to do better across the course of their life. And so it does seem that there is some utility with regards to survival, or at least with regards to positioning in the dominance hierarchy, which is somewhat of a proxy for survival and for reproductive success. There's some association between that and the ability to abstract. So we could say that part of the reason that people got smarter was because smarter people were more likely to stay alive. Now, I think it's more complicated than that, too, because I believe that human males and females are in an evolutionary cognitive arms race, roughly speaking. And so as men get trickier, women get trickier to understand them, and then as women get trickier to understand, men get trickier to understand them. And so we've been chasing each other around this cortical expansion loop pretty much since we parted ways with the ancestor that we had in common with chimpanzees, and so that's roughly about 7 million years ago. I'm very aware of the unfairness of a meritocratic society, of its intrinsic unfairness. So let me give you an example. I had someone write me the other day. He had listened to some of my lectures on IQ, and he sent me his IQ scores. And he was in the 5th percentile, which basically meant that 95% of the people around him were faster cognitively than he was. And the letter wasn't very grammatically correct, and it wasn't very well written, although it was very sad. And he said that he had a very difficult time finding a job and keeping one, that he was constantly frustrated and unnerved, and that's a terrible thing.
People who are less verbally sophisticated are more likely to gravitate towards all-encompassing simple theories, because of course they are. I think you might be able to say the same thing about people who hold a very low-resolution, schematically conservative viewpoint, where they don't deviate from tradition at all, and where they're not particularly sophisticated in defending their beliefs. Openness is associated with verbal IQ. So if you have a low verbal IQ, you're likely to be lower in openness. Generally speaking, openness predicts liberal viewpoint.
So there are fewer women mathematicians in the higher echelons. Okay, but here's something interesting about mathematical ability. First of all, it's very rare, so that's the first thing to keep in mind. Now, it looks like if you look in junior high, mathematically gifted and males and females are approximately as common. Now, there's a little bit of debate about that, because there is some evidence that maybe at the very upper extremes there's a male advantage, just like there's a male disadvantage at the low end, because the male distribution for intelligence might be flatter.
But political correctness, it's not exactly merely an extension of liberal belief. But the correlation between politically correct belief and verbal IQ was negative 0.45, which is a walloping correlation. It was one of the biggest correlations we ever saw in any study. It's higher than the correlation between IQ and grades, which is really something, because those measures are kind of the same thing.
Crazy.
Yeah, and there is evidence in the university setting too that the most politically correct.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to speak to you about the power of perseverance. In a world where instant gratification is the norm, it's easy to forget that the most rewarding accomplishments often take time, effort, and a lot of patience. Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This mindset is what differentiates those who achieve greatness from those who settle for mediocrity. Perseverance means pushing through the tough times when giving up seems like the easier option. It means believing in your vision and working tirelessly to bring it to life, no matter the obstacles you face. Think about the people who inspire you. Are they the ones who gave up at the first sign of difficulty? Or are they the ones who kept going, who fell and got back up, who faced rejection and still pursued their dreams? It's not the setbacks that define us, but how we respond to them. Every challenge, every failure is a lesson in disguise, a stepping stone towards your success. Let me share a story about a man named Colonel Harlan Sanders. At the age of 65, after a lifetime of failures, he decided to start selling his fried chicken recipe. Rejected 1,009 times by potential franchises, he finally found success, and today, KFC is a global brand. Imagine if he had given up after the first or 100th rejection. The world would have been deprived of his legacy. Each one of you has a unique potential, a light that can shine brightly if you don't let temporary darkness snuff it out. Your dreams deserve a fighting chance. Remember that the pain you are feeling today is the strength you will feel tomorrow. Every effort, every struggle, every sacrifice is an investment in your future self. So, embrace the journey with all its highs and lows. Keep your eyes on your goal and do not be deterred by temporary setbacks. The road to success is a marathon, not a sprint. And every step you take brings you closer to your destination. Stay focused, stay determined, and above all, keep moving forward. Thank you.
Disciplines are those who are simultaneously most dominated by females and that have the least bright students.